I work in Geneva, Switzerland. I'm the executive director of UN Watch. When I started at UN Watch, I knew something about what the United Nations was, but I think until I got there, I never had a clue of what it felt to be in a room where the worst dictators, murderers, tyrannies of the world sit there and pronounce themselves on human rights, accuse others, and repeatedly, time after time, scapegoat one nation, the State of Israel, as the world's only criminal on human rights. This council has, after all, done something. It has enacted one resolution after another, condemning one single state, Israel. It can make you sick in the stomach. Actually, if I don't need to be in a session and I can read the notes and have my assistants sum up things, I don't need to be there, that's better for my health. The United Nations Human Rights Commission was founded by one of the great humanitarians, Eleanor Roosevelt. But over time, this body became hijacked. And by 2003, the dictatorship of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was elected to chair the Human Rights Commission. So from 1946, Eleanor Roosevelt, 2003, Colonel Gaddafi, the decline of human rights at the United Nations.
The United Nations is totally ineffective. It should be abolished. It is a completely ineffective organization except in one matter. It has legalized Jew hatred brilliantly. Its main success story is this demonizing of Israel and its valorizing of Palestinian terrorism. That's the success story of the UN.
I'll never forget when the coup d'etat happened in Gaza Strip, when Hamas violently ousted the PLO. I happened to be at the United Nations Human Rights Council during that time, and one speaker after another from Arab states, Islamic states, were accusing Israel of massive violations of human rights against the Palestinians, of violating the laws of war. And I was listening in my earpiece to these speeches, and yet I was watching the news of what was happening on the ground on my computer screen. And the news was that Hamas was pushing PLO officials off of rooftops, that in the Gaza city of Beit Hanun, Hamas officials entered a hospital and had seen PLO officials who were wounded on hospital beds and taking out guns and shooting them, saying, you know, you don't look bad enough. So that's what was happening on the ground. So the disconnect between what is said at the UN, what's actually happening on the ground, hurts the victims. They're not there to help the victims. They're there to scapegoat. It's part of a narrative where Israel is this meta criminal.
The UN has become basically a hate fest. And if you believe in fairness, or if you really take human rights seriously, the UN is a dangerous place for you. So where do we turn when our international bodies that hold themselves as arbiters of justice or courts of last refuge are themselves anti-Semitic?
I give the floor to UN Watch.
6 decades ago, in the aftermath of the Nazi horrors, I have become the most hated person at the United Nations. When I walk into the Human Rights Council, I feel the glares of hatred, of enmity directed at me. I see it in their eyes, and it's from dictatorships, it's from Arab states, it's from others, sometimes even from some democracies. So when I walk into the Human Rights Council, I feel the hatred all around me, and it's not easy. It's not easy. Is it possible that the true purpose of this session is to silence the true victims and voices of human rights around the world by deflecting attention from the world's worst abuses? At the end of the day, this is a political body. It is not a body as most Europeans think. When they hear the words United Nations Human Rights Council, and when they read a headline, the UN Human Rights Council said, for most Europeans, that's like saying, and the Lord said to Moses at Sinai. They think it's gospel. When those sitting around the table at the Human Rights Council are not Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle. In fact, it's Gaddafi, Castro, and the House of Saud. And Europeans don't realize that, and they don't want to know that. They have really a fantasy, which is very beautiful and it's very pretty, but it hasn't been true in perhaps 5 decades. In meetings with European diplomats, not all of them, but a number of them, I have sensed a hostility to Israel that is very raw. Israel has become the Jew among the nations. And I feel that in certain of my meetings with Western, with European in particular delegates. Not all, but some of them. Like it or not, the UN matters. The United Nations is the single most important repository of international legitimacy, and people around the world believe in the UN. Even though things are upside down, we need to be there and we need to fight lies and spread the truth. And that's what we try to do at UN Watch, which is in a room of darkness, we try to light a candle of truth.